Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the follow-up with Peter Kageyama from he's from beautiful Tampa Bay, Florida, visiting us with us today. As we get started, just a couple things is we want this to be as interactive as it possibly can be, and so if you have any questions, just kind of put something in the chat box. I'll keep track of them, and at appropriate time we'll get that out to Peter. You have the opportunity to talk, and so if you want to talk, just let us know and ask some questions. We've got some great things planned for you today. Let me just introduce Peter in this way. First of all, I just walked over to my when I was getting ready for this, I walked into my office and I pulled these out. These two books that I've read a couple times, and they're getting a little dog-eared. But these are written by Peter, and one is called Love Where You Live, Creating Emotionally Engaging Places. And my favorite one is For the Love of Cities, the love affair between people and their places. And I just want to read one couple of lines from this one. It says, when we love our city as we love another person, we will go to extraordinary lengths for them. We will sacrifice for them. We will push ourselves for them. We will tolerate their shortfalls. We will forgive their excesses, all because we see their true nature. And I just thought that's something that's kind of guided me as a lot of you know, I was city manager for many years, and I now work with the League of Cities and Towns. And so with that, let me introduce Peter.
Well, thank you, John. That was a nice turn of phrase there. It's like, hey, I actually wrote that. So
you actually wrote that.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I'm actually working on, next year is actually the 10-year anniversary of that book, For the Love of Cities. I'm actually working on For the Love of Cities Revisited. So I'm going back and I'm looking at that. And I'm sort of commenting on my own work. It's going to have most of the original content, but some new content, some revisions, some new things. Like here was some stuff I was very right. Here's some stuff I got a little wrong. But I think it's been really a really interesting process for me to go back and read that, and I'm glad that that still works for you. I think the ideas in there are still really timely. You know, some of the graphs may be a little out of date, but yeah, we'll but thank you for that, and thank you guys for joining us here in virtual land. As I said, I've got a little bit of a deeper dive in some of the stuff that I talked about. I want to do maybe 20 minutes or so on that, and maybe turn it back over, and we'll and be able to answer some questions. So I'd encourage you to put the questions into the chat box. John will sort of curate some of those, and we'll kind of take it from there. And if we want to wrap up early, I'm sure nobody will be disappointed about that either, but let's go ahead and see what we're going to do here. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, if you'll bear with me for a second. All right. Okay. So here's one of the benefits of these last few months is it's given us certainly a lot of time and a lot of opportunity to do things, to learn to cook, to learn to sew, to work out, to clean the closets, to clean the garage, and hopefully it's also given us some time to think. And one of the things that that is a rare opportunity in how busy we actually are there. So let us appreciate the time, that rare opportunity to rethink some things here. And I have a few suggestions, some stuff that I've been thinking about for a long time that I think is very timely, and hopefully this is useful to all of you in sort of the work that you do. I think security, rethinking security. Now, unfortunately, security is everyone's job these days. It is prevalent, it is necessary there. And we tend to think about there's a certain group of people that should be leading on security, first responders, the police, fire service, all those folks. And that's fine. They certainly have the training and the expertise in that. The thing is that when we defer to them, I think there's the tendency that maybe we end up with security solutions that maybe look like this. Now, this is okay, I guess that is a security solution. And if you've traveled internationally, sometimes you see heavily armed officers in international airports. Sometimes you can see them in US airports. And I guess that is a security solution, but it's the kind of security solution that also makes you nervous, right? It's the kind of security solution you look around and go, should I be here? This doesn't feel as secure maybe as possible. And for me, for cities, of course, have to be in the business of security. But for the most part, I believe security has to be prevalent, but mostly invisible. So I don't need to see this. In fact, I don't want to see this, there. So cities have to figure out other ways to bring about and to create a sense of security. And again, if we default to the security providers, we're probably going to end up with more solutions that look like this than maybe some other more creative solutions that we might actually find interesting, like this one. This is the Fremont Bridge Troll in Seattle, Washington. This is about 25 years old there. And so about 25 years ago, there's this Fremont Bridge in this Fremont neighborhood there, and there was some bad stuff going on underneath the bridge, especially at night. Go figure. There. So the locals were complaining to the police department, says, hey, we want more police, we want more surveillance, more lighting. Hey, help us out here. We got some bad stuff going on underneath the bridge. And the police said, okay, let us take a look at it. Well, in the meantime, along comes of all organizations, the Arts Council with an idea. It says, hey, what if we put a troll under the bridge and scare away the bad guys? And that's exactly what they did. They built this massive troll there, and that troll is huge. That is actually a full-size VW that is there in its hand. And what did the troll do? It's like it scared away the bad guys, because now there's all these tourists and locals and people coming up because they want to see the troll. They want to take pictures. They want to climb on it. And so all of this good activity drives away the bad activity. That's really cool. Of course, now the neighborhood has all these tourists in there. It's like, okay, but that's another problem. But overall, when was the last time we asked the Arts Council for their solution to a security problem? Well, why not? Because again, they might have a different perspective on how to do this and maybe doing it in a different sort of way. Or how about something as simple as lighting? When we're doing lighting, and this was actually in downtown Columbus, Ohio, and it was these really cool fluorescent lights, and they would change colors. It was programmable, very cool. And this is the kind of stuff that's actually gotten a lot less expensive these days there. And the thing is underneath a bridge is probably not the place where you typically want to be at night there. And they could have made this like these super bright fluorescent lights, the kind of lights that were so bright, even the cockroaches would flee from it. And I guess that is a security solution, but they didn't. They said, you know what, let's make it beautiful at the same time. Let's make it interesting at the same time. That is a really cool sort of idea. And again, something, if we thought about it in a different way, we might come up with a better security solution. Or how about this stuff, these glow rocks? This is this building material that actually absorbs light during the day, and then at night it sort of gives off this sort of soft glow. And there are cities that are using it to line parks and pathways and parking lots there. So again, I know why we have to do certain things, but why don't we do that maybe with a slightly different lens, maybe do it in a cool way that's kind of visually interesting. And I will go back to this idea of the dog park as well. The dog parks, in addition to being those great sort of social epicenters, social capital building things, are really good for neighborhoods as well. Because think about this, the dog walkers, people are, if it encourages dog ownership in a neighborhood there. And the dog walkers create this, what Jane Jacobs called the eyes of strangers on the street. There's nothing worse than walking down a completely empty street, right? We feel pretty exposed by that. But hey, if there's dog walkers out there, it's all good. So maybe one of the things we ought to be thinking about here is how do we get more dog parks and more dog ownership into neighborhoods? Because again, this creates a sense of security and a sense of safety. And again, it has nothing to do with the armed police or the armed or the most obvious sort of response. But if we thought about this stuff and we rethink it, and now is the time for rethinking, let's maybe approach it in a different sort of fashion. Or and this one is something that vexes cities all over the world, right? And I'm sure all of you have a special love affair with parking. I know I do, yes. The thing about parking is that it's actually infrastructure that makes us both mad and sad there. Because I would point out that all of our emotions around parking are negative, right? Other than that very rare moment when you're trying to get somewhere and somebody pulls out in front of you and you slide in right behind them there, and for a moment you feel like a god, right? Yes, great parking job, but you still have to, pay for it. You still have to sort of, go and figure it out. It's like, okay, is it the machine down there? Do I have to use the app? It's all kind of very confusing. So again, all of our emotions around parking are negative, and parking is actually the flip side of the other thing. It is the flip side of driving. And and again, I know we have this sort of idea of a love affair with our cars, but the worst part of our day, or historically, maybe it hasn't been the case in the last few months, maybe fewer people are commuting and whatnot, but for the most part, the worst part of our day is our daily commute. It's terrible. It's bad for us physically. It's bad for us emotionally, psychically. In fact, you're your worst version of yourself when you're in your car, in your commute. And I can prove it. Because you will say and do and yell things that you would never say and do and yell in any other context other than the fact that you're behind the car or behind the wheel of your car. So yeah, you're your worst version of yourself there. And again, the idea about parking. Parking, again, makes us feel both mad and sad. And here's the thing. When it comes to solving parking problems, most cities, what they want to do, they want to give you more of the thing that makes you both mad and sad, right? It's like, oh, we need to get more parking spaces here. We need to get, another parking deck here. We need to do this, we need to do that. The thing is if we're having the conversation about parking from a technical sort of standpoint, from a logistics sort of standpoint, from a financial sort of standpoint, we're going to lose. Because no matter what, you can add more parking spaces, more garages, all this kind of stuff, all the technology, people still are going to hate parking. They're going to say parking is a pain in the ass. It is just, again, it is human nature. The thing is we fixate on that side of the equation. Why are we not fixating on the other side of the equation, which is this? You got to make the journey worth the effort. If your city, if you're downtown or wherever it is, if you've got something really cool and interesting going on there, it's like, yeah, maybe it's not the easiest place to park, but once they get there, they go, man, this is so cool. I'm glad I'm there. That's the side that I think we miss the point on. We're never going to solve parking. You're never going to get people to love your city, because of parking. And I don't care how much you do, people are still going to say parking is a pain in the ass. Again, human nature. So let us focus on the thing that we can fix. Let's make it interesting. Let's make the journey worth the effort. And then maybe people will forget a little bit about, all the pain in the ass that generally parking is. All right, and I think this is the big one. And this is actually something that I wrote about in the new book The Emotional Infrastructure of Places, is rethinking the value of small things. Now, of course, I talk about the idea of love notes, and those are generally small things there as well. But I want us to talk also about not only small things, but the value of small solutions. Now, the thing about solutions for cities is they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? There's a whole infrastructure, pardon the pun, around selling you stuff. IBM created that whole idea of smart cities, and I'm all for the idea of smart cities and all this other stuff, but the whole idea kind of feels behind that is like they want to sell you hardware, they want to sell you software, they want to sell you solutions, right? And again, it seems like our problems as cities have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger there. And and part of that is then we also feel like we need to solve the big problem. And it's kind of in our American nature that we're big, we're bold, we tend to think about stuff in that sort of way. And kind of it goes back to this guy. I guess Daniel Burnham. He was an architect and a designer there in Chicago in the late 1800s. He was one of the main architects of the Chicago World's Fair there. If you've ever read Devil in the White City, he's one of the main sort of protagonists, there in the book. And he's famous for this quote. It says, "Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work." So basically he's saying go big or go home, right? And I think we've kind of overdone it on that. There's this tendency to think like, well, the big problems that is worthy of my attention, right? As opposed to solving small problems. And I also think that maybe there are companies there that's like, well, I can't make as much money helping you solve small problems as I can make money helping you solve big problems. So I think our radar has gotten a little too out of whack here, that we're only attuned to the big problems. Because there's something about the problems that are closest to us. There's a reason why people have a particular ire over potholes. It's because it's immediate. It is proximate. It is in that it's on my drive to work, to school. It is on my block, and I hit the damn pothole every time, right? We feel very aggrieved by potholes, again, because they are close to us. Yet you talk about a major threat, an existential threat, like global climate change. Like that is a real big problem. But because it's remote, because I don't feel it on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't feel in my face the way that pothole does, we tend to think, but we're very aggrieved by the pothole. So again, there's something about reorienting this and trying to solve the small problem. Now, as I pointed out, you get no love for solving the particular problem that is the pothole. You do have to fix it. But there are other small problems that maybe you could actually solve that might actually help us do some other really big and interesting things. And I really learned, I think I started to think about this in the last couple of years, and I went back and I watched something, and it's like, oh my God, this is it. The value of solving the small problem, I learned about it, I think, really from The Karate Kid. Great movie, right? We all know this movie. The original one, 1986, there. 1986, 84, 84 maybe. Yes, 84, I believe. Ralph Macchio, Pat Morita. Great movie. From my mind, it's also one of the greatest martial arts movies ever made. It's not because of the fight scenes. No, Bruce Lee owns the best fight scenes by far, hands down, there. But for its spirit and what it actually teaches about the martial arts, there, it is spot on. And Mr. Miyagi was the sensei we all sort of wish we had. Awesome stuff. And remember how he was teaching Daniel? Remember he was teaching him, Daniel says he wants to learn karate. And Mr. Miyagi says, okay, I will teach you. You do what I say. He's like, okay. First thing he says, wax on, wax off, paint fence, sand the floor, right? We all remember those things. And while he was doing that over and over again, these little things, Daniel doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks he's just being, unpaid labor for Mr. Miyagi. And it turns out he's actually learning karate at the same time. Remember that great scene where he says, show me wax on, show me wax off, show me sand floor. And he realizes he's actually learned something, muscle memory. That little thing done over and over again has actually helped him learn enough karate. Because the whole point of this is for him to learn enough karate so that he doesn't get destroyed in the All Valley Team Karate Championship, right? There. Now, there's no way to become a black belt in 6 weeks. But he can learn enough that he can actually survive. And of course, because it's a Hollywood movie, he actually wins the tournament. Great. There. Classic movie. There. Some of you may be watching Cobra Kai now. It's like, yeah, very cool. But nonetheless, the whole idea of doing that small thing over and over again to learn how to do this big thing, which is, again, not to get destroyed in the All Valley tournament, that's really interesting. And there's actually a term for that. It's called recursion. And it actually comes from computer science and sort of the olden days of computer science. Back, from punch cards and early sort of stuff before object-oriented programming and all this other stuff. Computer scientists didn't have, and programmers didn't have all the computing power that they did at the time. So they would have to write what they would call more elegant code in order to do stuff. So what would happen is, like, let's say you have this recurring problem or recurring function that you have to do within the context of this particular program. Well, you could write it out. It says, okay, they're doing this stuff, do this, machine code, do this, then do this, then do this. And then at some point it's like, okay, solve this problem. And then, do this, and solve this problem again. Like a tax program, let's say, there. Or what they could do is realize they have to solve this problem again and again and again. It says, okay, they call out the function. They says, okay, when you get to here, go over here, solve this problem, come back here and solve and keep going. So what they were doing, metaphorically, was they solve a small problem over and over again in the context of solving a bigger problem. It is called recursion, and it is incredibly powerful. It's like, wow, I learned about this stuff, and I thought, why aren't we applying this sort of idea to our cities, to social interactions, to culture and things like that? And it turns out we actually are. And I had this sort of aha moment about 3 years ago when I visited Muncie, Indiana. And Muncie showed me this really cool project that they'd done in 2016. It was called the Whiteley Year of Color. Now, Whiteley is a traditionally African-American neighborhood there in Muncie, Indiana. And they had this small community development corporation that had a tiny, tiny budget. It was trying to figure out how to make the neighborhood, to make the community a better place, right? And their budget was like $6,000. Like, well, that's a tough one. What can we do for $6,000? What they decided to do was paint the neighborhood, right? So they bought a bunch of paint, they bought a nice palette of colors, they bought a bunch of supplies, and they went to the community and says, okay, let's get together, we're gonna paint the neighborhood. And one of the first things they actually painted was the park. McCulloch Park is actually sort of Muncie's version of Central Park there. So it's a psychic center of this particular place. And it wasn't the city painting it, although they did work with the city to clear it. It was actually the community themselves. Remember I said, roll up your sleeves and get a little dirty? Well, that's exactly what they did. They went in, they painted the park. They painted the buildings, they painted the playground, they painted the equipment, they painted the park benches, they painted the picnic tables. And then they weren't happy just with that. Then folks went out into into the neighborhood. They started painting doors and mailboxes and stoops and curbs. And over a period of several weeks and months, the entire community starts to adopt this color scheme that is there, that they started out with that. And an amazing thing started to happen. Crime goes down not only in the park, but in the neighborhood. Why? Well, because the park looked better. And because it looked better, people were more likely to just simply look at it. And because it looked better, it actually drew more people in. They felt safer there. And because more people were in there, it actually did become safer because it scared away the bad activity. Remember the troll? Same kind of thing there. So they created this simple thing. They painted the park and the community, and this really positive thing started to happen. Excuse me. And then, property values start to go up. Social capital goes up because people met each other in this process. Don't assume that everybody in a neighborhood knows each other. It's like, no, far from it. It's like, oh, where do you live? I live around the block. Oh, I've lived here 10 years. Like, oh, cool, nice to meet you. There. And because, because they painted it, then it's like, well, maybe we need to fix some stuff. So again, this simple thing of paint, the power of a coat of paint to bring this community together, recursion, a small thing done over and over again, actually helps solve some of the biggest problems we actually have. Because if I said to you, hey, you've got $6,000 to solve the problem of crime in your community, it's like, what can you do? It's like, I can't do it. It's overtime for one police officer for a few months. It's half the training on a police dog. It's, a couple wheels on a police cruiser. It just can't be done. What if it could? If we looked at the problem in a different way and look for solutions like this that actually have this recursive properties. So again, big problems we tend to think have to require big solutions, right? Well, again, if we reorient and rethink this stuff, we're going to come up with some other opportunities. This one is really interesting. The plastic straw ban, and this is actually kind of going on all over the country because we sort of have this collective awakening. It's like, wait a minute, we produce an awful lot of plastic that ends up in the ocean, that ends up in dumps, and it's got a really long sort of shelf life there. It takes forever for it to degrade, and it ends up in the wrong places, like the noses of sea turtles, right? This was kind of the photo that kind of captured people's imaginations, where this poor sea turtle had gotten this piece of plastic, a plastic straw stuck in its nose, and they had, they captured the turtle. They removed this thing, they set the turtle free. But that photo became sort of the rallying cry. And all of a sudden now this kind of captured people's imaginations. And so this whole campaign around ditching the plastic straw gets a lot of momentum out of there, mostly because of that photo op there, and the message that people were saying that, look, we create, tons of this plastic straws every day. We can do better. And this all of a sudden now feels a little bit different because that is a behavior that maybe I can actually change. Like, I don't feel like I can personally make a huge difference in terms of global climate change for the most part. It's like, again, it's a big sort of existential problem. But what if maybe my contribution is changing a tiny little behavior, and I change it, and John changes it, and everybody else, and all of a sudden now we get enough people, we get enough momentum. A small thing done over and over again actually amounts to a very big thing. And all of a sudden now we are actually able to address a huge problem that otherwise we have no idea where to even start. What was interesting is my hometown here, St. Petersburg, in 2018, they actually voted, City Council voted to officially ban the straw. And earlier this year, we actually officially banned plastic straws from restaurants here in St. Pete. Great. Now, what's interesting is when the City Council actually did this in 2018, there was kind of an interesting bit of blowback about this. A lot of the letters of the editor and a lot of the sentiment around the naysayers around this was, why are you doing this? It's like, don't we have bigger, more important problems that we should actually be tackling? And yeah, okay, I guess we always probably do have some bigger problems there as well. But here's the thing. If that is the case, if that is the argument that, before you solve any of these smaller problems, you have to go and solve all of the big problems ahead of time, then you never get to the smaller problems. And again, the problems that are closest to us tend to be smaller problems. So again, if we have to go out and solve all of these big things before we can even look at these little things, never going to happen. So I think we are capable as human beings, as cities, as organizations, we can do more than one thing at the same time. Yes, we can look at the big problem and we will do stuff towards that. But at the same time, we can actually solve small problems. And it turns out sometimes if we're really smart about this and we have a different sort of lens, we can actually solve the small problem that actually helps solve the bigger problem at the same time. Recursion. Write that down. It's a really great concept. And I bet once you start looking for stuff, you're going to find examples of that maybe you're already doing. It's like, yeah, we started to do this. I had no idea, but it turns out we're making an impact over here. That's great. Well, let's understand why that happened. And maybe we can replicate that, if not in a similar situation, but maybe we can replicate the idea and the thinking that actually gets us there. Recursion, really kind of powerful. And I think that's kind of wonderful. when we think about that. So again, that is one of those small things that if it's done with not only great love, but with a little bit of thinking, we could move some mountains there. Again, think about that. Global climate change, like how do I, as a human being, what can I do? I can stop using the damn straw. And it turns out that might actually make a difference. And it actually does. So small things. And again, as we come out of COVID here and into the next phase of all this, we're going to be under some pretty tight budgetary constraints. We all know that. So we ought to be looking at, it's like, okay, I can't hire IBM to go out and do the smart cities big solution to this. How do I do the local small solution that we know actually has an element of this in there as well? And so that, I think, is an interesting sort of approach to this. And I hope that, that you guys now, when you, again, maybe we have a little bit more time to think than we've had in previous years, that things have slowed down a little bit, that, there's a different sort of vibe out there. And I think that, it'd be a terrible thing to waste this crisis and not come out of it with some new thinking and some new ideas. So with that, I'm going to sort of stop sharing the screen. I will be happy to answer some questions there. How are we doing? All right.
Great. It's time for your questions. It'd be great if we showered today and look okay to actually let us see your pictures up here. It would be wonderful if you wanted to open your audio if you feel open your video if you feel likely, and
yeah,
let's ask some questions. Peter, let me ask one question why these others are coming on I think we've talked a lot about COVID and we've talked a lot about other things, but there's a lot going on now with dealing with equity and yes, those type of, social equity, racial equity, and those type of things. And I think one of the outcome is we figured out that we don't know what we don't know kind of thing about other groups.
Yes.
And what have you seen? How do we reach out and make those, I hate to say those kind of people, but people that we're not familiar with their culture or things like that, feel and actually start loving their community and doing things to help them love their community?
To feel welcome, to feel part of the community there.
Exactly right.
That's a hard thing there. And again, you're right. We don't know what we don't know in all this. And I would start with maybe as a city manager, as an elected official, something like that, what can we do? Well, let's look at, I would start with what are some of the most egalitarian aspects of our community? And I would come back to things like the park, playgrounds, and the library, right? And those, especially the parks, have proven to be incredibly important to us in COVID world. Now, the thing is that parks tend to be, there is a social inequity in where parks are. So maybe what we need to do as a city, it's like, there's a park on this side of town, or there's a park on that side of town, and one of them gets a lot of use, and because it's in a better neighborhood, but the other one doesn't because it's kind of gotten run down. And why has it gotten run down? Because we allowed it to. So I think part of this is, let's address some of that social inequity. It's like, as a city, it's like, where do I go? Where do I start? One of the simplest place would be, let's make some of the equitable places in our city a little bit more equitable, because that's what they need to be. That's a simple place to start. And from there, you're opening up to more conversation there. But again, I get it that cities don't know where to start, but that'd be a really good one to start. Let's make the park system a better, fairer sort of representation of our community.
Okay. We have a question in the group chat from Mayor Nihas from Moab. You probably heard of Moab, Utah. Yes. What's your advice, and what is your advice on the community visioning process, and where would you start?
You know what's happening? There's a fire alarm going off in my building literally right now. I think it's a test, but if you're hearing that from my side, I apologize. Hopefully it stopped. Okay.
If we see smoke, we will quit this.
I'm going to run. Yes. And that's why.
We see smoke, we'll quit this. Mayor Nihas says, what's your advice on the community visioning process, and where would you start?
That's a good one. You've got to do it, of course. Community visioning, planning, all that stuff, charrettes, focus groups, all this stuff. And I know you guys hate it because, again, it's you bring people in, you ask them, these questions, you kind of get them excited about stuff, and they're going to give you lots of ideas that are usually very big, very expensive, and then they're going to look at you guys like, hey, now you guys need to go do this stuff. So part of it is, I think we tend to ask the wrong questions in that process. We tend to ask questions like, well, what do you think there? And I get why we do that. But when people are doing that, they're actually trying to respond in a way that they think maybe they're supposed to. They're trying to sort of speak a language that they're not really conversant in, because they don't understand floor to area ratios. They don't understand density. They don't understand parking and transportation limitations and environmental impacts and all this stuff. They are, again, they're trying to sort of maneuver through this. You guys know the language, as it were. So instead of asking them just what they think, ask them what they feel, and ask them what they want to feel about their place, because I think that's a way to get to a more articulatable answer for them. Because people say, they might say about this particular area, well, this makes me feel sad, or I don't feel safe here. Or this one, I really like this place. It makes me happy to go there. I love bringing my kids there. I go, oh, okay. If somebody says to me that, a particular part of the community says, I don't feel safe there. Well, then we as the community developers, designers, builders, it's like, I know how to make that place safer. And it's, again, stuff that we've talked about here as well. But we don't get to that question if we don't ask it maybe in the right way. So I would say, ask them what they feel, ask them what they want to feel. And then ask them for not just the big thing. Because again, when we do the charrettes, we always look at the big, it's like, what's the 20-year future of our city, blah, blah, blah. Ask them what the small thing, what's a small thing that would help us, make the city better, not next year, next week. That would be a great way to sort of change the conversation.
Great. Is that all right, Mayor? You got that? Another question, in your experience, do solutions to municipal problems most effectively originate from the top, like elected officials, or from the ground staff up, like from staff? If from the top, how can staff help them?
Yeah, I think it emerges from people who are willing to speak up and voice an idea and an opinion. If it comes from the bottom up, it's basically because the leadership has created an environment where staff feel empowered to articulate an idea, to throw something out there, that they don't feel like they're waiting for orders from on high to execute down. So yes, I think that leadership matters in the sense of creating an environment where people do feel more willing to do that. And I don't think there's any, there's not necessarily a one way to do it. Maybe you have a great inspired leader. That's great. Or maybe, you don't necessarily have the, somebody who's is a visionary in that sense, but they're really great at administration and organization, and they get the right people in the right spots. So I don't think it's necessarily, one or the other, but I think it's creating an environment where up and down that food chain, everybody feels like they have a voice and actually can maybe, to throw out an idea and maybe even a potential solution there as well.
I also, this is my question, I also get the sense that if it starts at one place or the other, it becomes somewhat contagious and grows. Yeah. And so that's probably a good way to look at that as well.
And maybe, and looking for solutions that maybe cut across traditional departmental boundaries. I know that's hard there as well, because when, it's like, hey, we're the Parks Department. We tend to think we solve the parks issue. We're Public Works. We solve this issue. We're code compliance. We solve this issue. Well, if the issue is creating a better, more interesting, more lovable city, then it's all of our issues. And how do we figure out how to work together around that?
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's do it this way. Jarrett, wait, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting yourself and ask your question, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So my question is, how often should we drop those love notes in our city? Like, is a once a year good enough? Is it a quarterly? Is it every 5 years? Kind of, what's the best effectiveness there?
You want to schedule.
Just how should we set our goal, basically?
I would say the more the better there. So sometimes it might be a big love note. Sometimes it's little things. I mean, think about it in our own interpersonal relationships. It's like, When do you give flowers? When do you give a gift? It's like if it's just at Christmas and on the birthday, it's like, okay, you got to do that. But sometimes it's the unexpected, sort of love note that just, it's like, well, why'd you give them flowers? Well, just because, right? Well, that is maybe sometimes even more surprising and maybe even more memorable simply because of that. So I think, there shouldn't be any limitation or really any sort of overt schedule for the love notes. I would encourage you guys to look for the opportunities anywhere you can find them. And sometimes it's like, hey, we got to deliver this thing anyways. Well, let's simply, we're going to do this. Well, what if we made it a little bit more fun and a little bit more interesting like this? And all of a sudden now something we were going to do anyways becomes a love note because we thought about adding a little bit of value or a little bit of creativity on top of it at the same time.
Great. Don, you had a question? Don Tingey? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, my question would be, how do you instill the desire to make it more systematic than just feeling like it's a project or part of a project?
Well, I think John said it there a bit ago that it's contagious, right? Some department, somebody does something cool and somebody looks like, hey, did you see what Public Works did? It's like, yeah, that's interesting. And maybe it's like, well, maybe we got to up our game here a little bit as well. And maybe as the leaders in a community, maybe one of the things you ought to do is instill maybe there might be a little bit of healthy competition, in the departments. Like, hey, we're all trying to love on our community, more and more. We're trying to do cool stuff here. Let's share that. Let's socialize those ideas. So it doesn't just, hey, that wasn't just something that was cool that happened in one particular department and they're the only ones who know about it. No, let's find a way to maybe, sort of share that across departments. And I think maybe you can start to inspire each other and challenge each other to do something a little bit, a little bit above and beyond. And it's a culture thing, isn't it? That, you create an innovative culture by sharing the innovations that we all sort of come up with, on a day-to-day, on a week-to-week basis. And you just make that sharing part of the deal.
Thank you.
Great. Jill, what do you got?
My question to you is, how do you get your elected officials that are so set on, rather than spending any money for anything that we would consider as one of those love notes,
Right.
To buy in on this without the worry of, you can't spend that money, it's too much, but really for the community?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what I was saying about, costs and value, right? Well, the reason why the elected officials are so sensitive to that is because they're the visible ones. Even if you are in, maybe you have a council mayor system or something like that. I don't care, weak mayor, strong mayor, no, it doesn't matter. For most people, the elected officials feel that sort of, they are at sort of the front line on all of this. They're going to catch the heat. At council meetings, they're going to get the letters of the editor, people calling their office, email, all this other kind of stuff. And they get back-footed because they have to justify the cost of things. Now, cost is an easy thing to sort of assess. It's right there. It costs this much money to do X, Y, or Z. Here's the price, there. Value is harder to sort of determine. So the thing is that if you're just looking at costs, you're being lazy, right? Now, the naysayers, it's easy for them to be lazy because they just point to the cost and say, how do you justify spending public dollars for this? Because, and then again, you guys have to then help the elected officials. Maybe you have to help give them some language, and maybe it has to do with some of the stuff that I said about that. Let's not just talk about cost, folks. Let's also talk about value. So if the electeds know how to respond to that, say, well, look, this costs this much money, but here's the value to us as a community for doing this, okay? And then again, I would say, let's talk about what's the cost of not doing that? What's the cost of doing it and doing it poorly, doing it ugly, doing it boring there? Because again, those things do actually have a cost. So I think it's on us, that understand sort of the mechanisms there. Help the electeds, with some language so that they can defend this. Because I think at heart, they want to do cool stuff too. They want to make people smile. They want people to be happy about this. And honestly, the naysayers, they're really not the majority. In fact, they're far from it. But they are a vocal minority, and they're very willing to sort of speak up and be heard, and they're loud, and they're oftentimes organized they're far from the majority there. But unfortunately, they are oftentimes the only voices that our elected officials really seem to hear there. Because again, the vast majority of folks there, they're fairly content. They're okay with that, but they don't necessarily speak up. So we have to help our electeds deal with those folks.
Great. Tim Watkins.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for inspiring us today. Left us with a lot of great information and ideas to ponder. So on this idea of emotional infrastructure, one of the common themes that I've heard throughout this conference is the challenge and the need to diversify and to find places for growth with greater intensity, and that design matters quite a bit in terms of having people have a positive emotional response to that, which I would argue would be a form of sustainability to embrace and integrate into the community. And so from an urban design perspective, as it relates to placemaking, creating those positive emotions as you walk down a street and enjoy looking at different buildings, there can be a debate as to when design standards go too far, raise costs, but without enough design standard, there can be a negative reaction and an outcry against bringing in and diversifying. So I just love to hear your perspective on emotional infrastructure as it relates to planning for nice looking and beautiful new neighborhoods.
So what's the case for design standards, right? It's like, how do we justify that there? Well, I think it goes back to what you said, that there is value in people feeling good and positive about your places. And if I could use sort of an analogy there, having design standards is like having personal standards. It's like, if we say we as a city, as a town, we have these design standards because we have, says, we're up here. That you're proposing a building that's ugly and doesn't fit within, the context of our downtown or this or that. It's like, that's not good enough for us. So I think that's showing a sort of a self-confidence and a sort of a version of self-respect there. And if you sell it to people that way, there, it's not just about chasing the dollar. And I get sometimes, cities, oftentimes, they're happy for any development. They're happy for anybody who's willing to come in and invest in something in their community. But have some, I think having standards says, well, wait, we have expectations of you as a business, as a developer. If you're going to come here, you've got to do stuff that's good enough for our community. And I think that is maybe the way you sell it to folks. Some people are saying, well, you're chasing off developers. Like, no, we're finding good developers, because the kind of developers are going to do something that is actually, worthy of our community. And I think if you contextualize it that way, I think people would understand that we're not just going to chase anything, that we have, personal, professional, community standards there as well. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think it does, and the need to be cognizant of costs, that's an important, in an area of where housing continues to increase and outpace incomes. So I think that's a balance act we'll be looking for in many of our communities.
Okay, I have no more questions. And I'm sorry, was someone else going to talk?
I'll ask a question. I'm Alma Haskell. I work with the transit agency here. And when I was working on the Mid-Jordan and the Draper lines, the FTA Small Starts program, I don't remember if it required or allowed 1% of the project cost to be put into art and transit. And they did away with that. It's not allowed anymore. In fact, you can't even pay for landscaping unless it's functional landscaping. Well, we tell them the city requires landscaping, so they let us pay for landscaping under the projects. Which are both needed, or is there a better approach, top down, allowing those types of art in transit or art in the city place? Or is it better coming from the bottom up, or do you really need both?
I think you need both. It'd be great to have that sort of 1% for development that says set aside for making it, for public art kind of thing. We've had some of that stuff here in the Tampa Bay area. There were cities that required it for new development. There in the last sort of economic downturn, the late, 2009 there, that most of that stuff went away as well and hasn't really come back. I think it's great if you can have it. I think you can absolutely justify it. It may be a little tougher sell in the next couple of years when, again, budgets are going to be, pretty tight. But I think that the argument can be made by the developers. So, you know what, if I'm sort of nudged in the direction of spending something to make it both beautiful, sort of investing in sort of the public art aspect of that, because it didn't, when like the statues probably don't say it has to be, like it doesn't have to be a statue that sits in front of the building, that the art aspect can actually be sort of ingrained into the infrastructure that has to be done there. And that's really the best kind, because actually what that does is that it actually increases the value of my work or of the project there as well. So I think the developers actually get it. So maybe one of the things we ought to be thinking about here is, if we don't have that overt sort of, 1% set aside, then how do we as communities sort of nudge businesses and developers into that sort of arena to actually do something a little bit better? Maybe part of it is design standards. If they simply say, look, if you are going to work in this region or this city, you got to do this, or we expect this. Or maybe you do something around, you give bonuses to developers, around floor area ratios, around parking. If they're willing to do something that is a bit more artistic here. You do the same thing with, transit, folks, that we'll give you breaks around some of the easements. I don't know exactly all that stuff, but I think there's ways to nudge them into doing stuff that actually increases the value of their work without requiring them, with the 1% set aside. Because again, right now, I think that's a hard sell.
Okay. Any more questions? If I may, Peter, let me just, part of my job with the League of Cities and Towns during, was putting together programs around COVID and trying to help cities, was to kind of capture some of the love notes that were sent out by cities. And one of my favorite ones was the city of Vernal, Utah. All these people had their kids out of school and they were trying to get them out. And so they took all their trails and they painted rocks. Yeah. And if the kids found painted rocks, they could go back to City Hall and redeem them for something downtown. And it was just kind of a fun little thing that got people out. I think it'd be really cool if all the people, or not all of them, but the people on the Zoom call right now would kind of brag about little love notes that maybe they've sent out in their communities, and I think would get a lot of value out of comparing notes that way, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if anybody's got a cool love note they want to share that they've seen, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see that or hear that.
I put you all on the spot. Do you want me to start calling on people I know? What kind of love notes have you seen sent out in your communities?
I'll share one while folks are thinking. Remember, I started out the conversation about egalitarian, parks and the libraries. Library system here in Largo, Florida, which is here in Pinellas County. The library was closed for many weeks as well. That included the bookmobile, because again, bookmobile, too many people in there. So what actually the city did is they worked with the library. They started using a city vehicle that you could order your books online from the library, and then the city had one of their city vehicles would actually pick up the books from the library and then deliver it to you. It was a home delivery service. It's Uber Eats for books from the library. I thought, brilliant. They're bringing the library to people. So yeah, that was definitely a love note.
Okay, great. Vern Phipps has some ideas. Vern?
Yeah, I put in the chat that for the 4th of July, which is a big celebration in Clearfield, and so we decided we still wanted to do something for the parade. So we did a reverse parade, mapped out a route through the city, and rode in the back of trucks and threw out candy. It was wildly successful. People really appreciated that.
Good on you, making the best of of a difficult situation. Yeah. Reverse parade. Did you drive in reverse, or did you just? Yeah, that would have been a little too on the nose.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been No, we didn't.
Okay.
I've
So
got one,
I'm
John.
sorry, what is a reverse parade, Vern? I mean, you just kind
Well,
of drove through all the neighborhoods rather than have them come to the main street. They drove through all the neighborhoods.
yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we went through the neighborhoods and mapped a route out. It was actually several hours in the sun, but it was our way of saying, hey, we're in this together. We appreciate that you can't do what you would normally do on the 4th of July. So we thought we'd make your family celebrations a little better.
Bring the parade to them. Nicely done.
Great. Others?
Hey, John,
Don?
I got one. For our Town Day celebration, since we couldn't meet together, our elected officials and a few others did a reverse float, and they delivered root beer floats to the residents that came to look at the city float, because we weren't going to have a parade. So they handed out root beer floats to about 1,000 residents.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's tasty. Well done. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing people, yeah, minimal cost, lots of, ROI on that. People felt good about that. Your team felt good about doing that. Yeah, that's wonderful.
This is Scott Isaacson's Farmington City Council. We challenged our Parks and Recreation early on to come up with some ideas, and they were wonderful. They produced 5 or 6. One of them was with a minimal investment, we bought little packages of chalk for sidewalk art and invited everybody to bring their kids over, get some free chalk and draw something on their driveway, take a picture of it, submit it, and the winners got a mention in the newsletter and got a prize. You could win different levels. We have a whole series of trails in Farmington, and we had different levels. If you completed all the trails, you got a badge, and we had a whole series of activities that because our parks were closed, it was good to have the Parks and Recreation people who were creative and came up with a lot of good ideas.
And I bet the parents appreciated giving their kids something to do.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
Well, when I opened this up, I thought, I know Park City has something going. Mayor Bierman?
Hi, John and everyone.
Oh, Andy.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, one of the things we did, we immediately realized, because our old town is a bunch of historic buildings, somewhat space constrained, we realized with COVID, people were going to be nervous going indoors. So on some Saturdays and every Sunday, the city is closing down Main Street, and without special permits or fees or requirements, we're allowing the businesses to pour out into the street to do their dining and to show their products and supporting it with art and music. And it's been loved by the community and really brought people out and together in a way that's fairly safe and appropriate.
Excellent.
Yeah,
And
those
you
are the
guys
kind of things. Go ahead, Peter.
I was gonna say, you guys really do have a lovely downtown there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Councilwoman Dominguez here from Murray. I am hosting Representative Mark Wheatley's own little classic car parade within Murray, northern part of Murray, moving it into South Salt Lake and joining forces with other council members within his district. We have, my dad is a part of he owns 7 classic cars. So we have about 5 car clubs that are coming, and
Nice.
they are more than happy to participate. And of course we had to get permits and whatnot and work with other cities, but it's really generating a lot of talk within the community and just getting kids out. We try to focus on the routes that had a lot of children, as well as large families, and really just celebrate the community and show them that we're here as well.
And they're socially distanced, and all of that. That's, yeah, very cool. And I know the car clubs, those folks are very proud of their cars. It's like any excuse to show them off. So yeah, well done.
Next.
If we're getting close to quitting time, that's fine too. So.
Yep. Anybody else would love to hear your love notes. I have a mother in a memory care unit not far from my house in the city of Highland, and of course there's no visitors. You know, we can't visit her because of COVID, and it's really hard. But the city of Highland put together a parade of all the elected officials, the fire department, as Councilmember Dominguez said, all the cool cars in town, and they actually did a parade just for this assisted living center. It was a mile and a half long, and it was just so these residents could come out and get a feel of the love that they have. And you know, my wife and I kind of hid across the street where we could see my mom, but you know, she couldn't see us, and it was one of the most incredible things was probably the best love note that we could get from a city, and it's a city that is just near here. So.
Well done there. Yes.
Dustin from South Jordan.
Hey, one other thing that we've done that we've had a lot of success with is our virtual race series. We had a race series with different 5Ks and a marathon, but we couldn't bring people together. So we developed the race courses. We publish it. The people still sign up. They still get a shirt. They still get a medal. Every week we publish a new course. They get out. They see a different park, a different part of the city. It was really successful over the summer, so much so that we had demand to do it again in the fall and have over 300 people that registered to get the weekly route to go out, run the 5K, the 10K, and see a new part of town every week.
Post their time and their picture, and that's cool.
They submit that at the end. We have prizes. It's really easy to take a screenshot of your phone of your time that you did the actual course, and yeah, it's worked out really well for our community.
Well, you know, those things have been going around Facebook and a lot of other social media platforms where, you know, those challenges, like the 20 push-up challenge, you got to do 20 push-ups for 2 straight weeks, or, you know, something. So you invite a bunch of friends. Basically, you've done that for the city. You're basically challenging folks to get out, use the parks. Good on you for that. There, again, make it sort of virtual but social at the same time because they're interacting. Yeah, that's very timely. Well done.
All right. Grant Farnsworth. Grant, you made a comment. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just a planner at the Utah Department of Transportation, but my experience is as a resident where I grew up in Centerville and was taking my kids back to the park where I grew up playing. And the park was just the same, but it had definitely aged 20 years and was a lot dingy and just really dilapidated, and no one was there. They just refinished a redevelopment, kind of making a lot of things nicer, where it used to be that they had some racquetball courts that were, I'm not sure if I've ever seen them anywhere else, but they don't have a back, they don't have a top, but they're concrete sides. So they're really kind of scary because you don't know who's in there. Anyway, they just did a big redevelopment of that area, and now it's just bustling. It's kind of unique because it's 3 different levels, but they all tie in together. And it was just great to see that transformation where going there before with my kids, it was like, okay, I'm never taking them back to this park, where now they ask me to go to that park and they can ride their bike in between the different levels. And so just kind of the value of just talking about what's the cost of not doing something, and that would have just been a great resource that had gone to waste, and where, you know, they had that plan, they developed it, and now it's just bustling, you know, from morning to the end. So it's just great to see that value.
I think a huge difference.
Yeah.
You know, again, we tend to think of them as passive sort of things, but they do require, I think, good planning, good execution. And that's why I think that it's one of the reasons why they can and need to be, I think, far more equitable in that. Grant, did you say you were from Centerville?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Hold on one second. I'm a big board game nerd. You see that?
Yeah. Yes.
It's actually a city building game. So you might want to look that one up. So yes, welcome to Centerville. So yeah, I just was on
How
that.
good. I'll have to look at that. That's great. Who knew?
Who knew?
You know, anybody else? Just in closing, one last question I have. It seems like that necessity becomes kind of the mother of invention here, and we've had to think outside the box more this year as city officials than any time. I mean, we just heard a lot of love notes, and a lot of them were just related to helping people deal with the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
How do we keep that going? I mean, it just seems like what we're doing are great things, and there's no reasons to stop doing those kind of great things.
I agree. I think part of it is you're going to need allies moving forward. I mean, when, during the pandemic, there clearly are cities and towns, they had to become the primary actors. That you guys have had to do things, on behalf of the community that, normally you wouldn't necessarily do. So you guys have absolutely led in all of this stuff. I think as we come out of this, remember when I mentioned those co-creators, those people who love your communities, the ones who have been sort of sitting on the sidelines because they haven't been able to get out of the house, they haven't been able to do, the stuff that they normally do. I think they're the natural allies. They're going to help you continue this energy, this enthusiasm, because again, once we go back to whatever the new normal is going to be, there's a lot of stuff that you guys are going to have to deal with, there. And I hope you will still find time to do something that's fun and, and amusing and all of that, that's beautiful at the same time. But I know that, we're going to be faced with a lot of, serious stuff that needs our attention. So maybe in all that, find that help. Is find those co-creators, the ones who want to work with the city, the ones who are willing to work with you guys. They're the ones that you're aware of, and empower them. Say, hey, look, you're going to be the natural sort of, I want to hand sort of this baton onto you. This is important stuff. We have to keep this momentum going. People are still they're still feeling a little rocky about all this stuff. And I think those co-creators can be the natural sort of next phase of all of this. That's not to say you're going to abdicate the role entirely, but I think we're going to recognize that there's a lot of stuff that you guys are going to be facing at the same time. I would work with those co-creators and see what they can do and what they can bring to the table to help, continue that energy and that enthusiasm.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I think that wraps up this roundtable. Thank all of you for participating, and Peter, thank you so much. You were a great mind and a great thinker and a great motivator.
Nice to do something live here. I've been recording a lot of these, so it's actually good to get some real Q&A and interact with real people. So hey, keep up the good work, guys. And if you think of anything anything else is really cool or interesting, I'm always looking for a good story. So you can email me. My contact information is there as well. So thanks a lot.